Copic, provided by Imagination International Incorporated. Brush pens provided by Tombow.
Our prof has relocated for this video. We are now on the other side of the planet in Guangzhou, China. We thought that that would be such a great opportunity to get to know Guangzhou as artists by traveling around the city, going to different sites, drawing in different areas. We're here because we were invited by the company ArtOne to come and teach some courses in drawing and design and history.
ArtOne is a company that helps Chinese students get an art education that prepares them for art schools abroad.
My day-to-day work is in film and video, and I love it, and it's a very expressive medium, and there's all kinds of things that you can do with it. I'm reproducing reality to a certain extent in terms of the actual form. Mm-hmm. Like, I take a picture of you, mm-hmm. or take a video of you, and it's your face.
Right. It's not going to change into something else.
Whereas when I'm working with traditional media, there's this plasticity to it. Mm-hmm. And I really try to push myself to be more chaotic, mm-hmm. and let go of that control and structure that comes with video and digital media.
Mm-hmm. I have been really fascinated with the cityscape. I feel like one of the many ways that people have described the way China has transformed over the last few years is through the architecture, the way the cities have sprung up around these industrial centers. I've just found myself sitting in our hotel room, for instance, looking out the window for all the different times of day and the way the cityscape changes and thinking about how huge this place is and how many people live here and the way that the culture or the economy and all these things are reflected in the buildings.
I think that this piece that I did, one in the park with the black and the trees and the white out, really was, I think, the first piece on this trip that I've really felt really happy about. Mm-hmm. Because it was the first time I've really been able to cut loose.
Yeah. I was surprised watching you work with collage outdoors, because the thing is, wind is something you have to deal with when you work outdoors, and me working with brush pens does not matter at all. And there you are, ripping things up and cutting and slicing and gluing, and I'm just going oh my God, how does this work? But for some reason it worked. You seem to have this system of, okay, everything behind me is my treasure trove of stuff, and then I bring it here, and then everything falls to the floor, and then I pick it all up later.
Basically. I mean, you really need the right spot to do that. You can't just up and do that anywhere. It was really great because I had my own little park bench, and
a lot of space around you.
A lot of space around me, which was then filled with people.
And you sat down and started working with your collage materials. I mean, you'd think you were a street performer or something.
It was insane. I was really unprepared for just how many people were coming over. It was very intense.
It's not just the collage part, it's when you start bringing in other media. Because not only did you go around the city, collecting restaurant flyers and museum brochures and things like that. So in a sense, Guangzhou really is embedded in your collage materials. But also you started working with gel pens, you pulled out some colored pencils at one point. You're talking to me about how maybe you want to put some acrylic paint on top of that. So how do you come up with that decision on what to do next? Because it's so spontaneous, but it seems like you do have a strategy somewhere.
I don't know. It's really intuitive. Mm-hmm. It's just sometimes I've got a whiteout pen that I work with. I started out this piece by basically putting down a dark layer because I was mostly looking at a scene with a lot of shadows with a few very strong highlights. And so when I was sort of analyzing it and trying to figure out how I was going to go into this, I knew I was going to lay down dark first, and then I wanted to pull out a couple of really sharp, bright whites. Mm-hmm. And so after I put down the ink and I put down the collage and all these different things, I sort of mucked it up a bit, then I sort of came back in and was all right, now I need to pull us forward.
Give it a little more clarity.
Yeah, clarity. I need to find that one point that we're going to focus in on. That in and of itself was very satisfying to do because it turned the piece from a thicket into something that felt more structured.
Right.
I think about the allocation of light and shadow a lot in structural terms. Structural and dynamic terms. Thinking, okay, there's a flow of darkness that kind of ties the upper half to the lower half. And then in here is a white part that keeps that balanced out.
It's fun for me to watch you work because it's so oh my God, not even close to the way I work. But it's fun for that reason because for me, it feels so foreign.
What surprised me the most was just how big of a country this is. You look at China on a map, and obviously it's big, but if you haven't experienced something like that, it's really shocking at first, and it's a lot to get used to.
One thing that surprised me about Guangzhou is how green it is for a city, because when I was in Beijing, I mean, there was like nothing alive for miles. And here it's like there's luscious shrubbery like everywhere.
I didn't really realize that we were going to be in a subtropical climate. You could feel the heat and humidity just hit you like a wave. And I remember just perspiring. It wasn't even damp. It was like droplets were coming off of my arms. That first meal was, I still think, the best meal.
No, the best part of that meal was the ex-boyfriend.
Oh, some of the foods have such... Well, all the foods are very not what I'm used to at all. They're very colorful.
Well, so the ex-boyfriend was this, what was it, like zucchini?
It was cucumber that was like cut in a corkscrew shape and then screwed together in like a really delicious spicy sweet sauce.
But the thing is, the translation for the name of the dish in the menu was an ex-boyfriend.
Not the ex-boyfriend, mind you, but an
ex-boyfriend. I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to eat food in America ever again, because the food here is so intense that I feel like everything in America is just going to taste so bland by comparison.
I don't know. I can't wait to have a salad.
Really? I don't miss salads at all.
I miss salads so much.
The number of ways that you can prepare meat and eat meat is insane.
With all the bones in it.
But it's so good, but I don't think that we're used to that. I mean, like, 2 of us here are vegetarians. Like, Casey and Eloise don't eat meat.
We went to a hot pot place, and because a lot of people on our team are vegetarian, we figured, okay, let's get a hot pot that's vegetarian. But the thing is, the only hot pot they had that was vegetarian was also really spicy. So of course, I don't eat spicy food. So I was like, okay, whatever, you guys can have your hot pot, that's fine. On the menu, there was a section that said signature dishes. It said goose sausage. And I thought, oh, that sounds sort of interesting. I've never had a sausage that was a goose before. So I ordered it thinking that it was going to be like its own separate cooked dish that I could eat by myself. They bring over this like giant plate and it's full of like flat pink stuff. And we're like, I don't think that's a vegetable. Eventually we figured out that goose sausage really meant goose intestine.
I guess the word for sausage in Chinese must be also the word for intestine.
Goose help, I will say right now, it is a term that Sam and I have made up. Sam is my partner. It means if someone is helping, but the helping is not helping, it's just getting in the way, like useless helping. It's called goose helping because geese are rather unlikable, mean, and annoying, and would never help anyone.
So you were goose helping the gooses?
Yes, I was goose helping the gooses.
Because you were really scary to them.
Yeah, they really didn't like me. One of them was swearing. Eloise helped me find the term for goose help in Chinese. Bangju.
This is what we do in class with our students.
Over and over again.
Today my students taught me like the best slang, which is just when something's awesome, you put out your hand like kind of like a surfer motion, and you just go Leo, 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 Leo. You just say 6 over and over and over again.
Whenever one of us pulls out a sketchbook, I feel like that makes the rest of us do the same thing. Like sometimes we'll be at dinner and then one of us is drawing, and I go, oh crap, I should be drawing too. Where's my sketchbook? And so it's like the peer pressure to like be drawing all the time. And I like that inspiration because in the past, whenever I've traveled, it's with my family or with like a friend who's not an artist. And here it's like really fun to just draw in a group because you get to see, oh, well, how are they looking at the space? And what is their style of drawing? And what is their materials? What is their approach? And that's really, really fun for me to see.
I really want to learn how to use those brush pens properly.
They're pretty awesome.
Clara's really tackled the brush pens in a really amazing way.
Color
Yeah, and seeing Lauryn.
That's because of Lauryn. It's Lauryn's fault that I'm working with color.
Or
rather, we credit Lauryn rather than it being Lauryn's fault.
Shut up.
Well, I don't like it because you're gonna pass me by and then they're gonna be like, Clara, what wonderful brush pen work. You're a master. Did you teach that to your student, Lauryn, here?
I don't think so, because you rule Copic marker land.
Oh.
Can't really compete with you there.
Oh, there are no Copic markers here, so... Well, there aren't in any of the art stores that we've been at, so the kids are like, ooh! I'm like, this is a $10 marker, and they're like, what?
There was this really magical moment when we came upon this group of like 15 middle-aged women dancing to Mandopop. I think Lauryn first sat down and started drawing, and then Casey did, and then I did, and then Clara was filming B-roll. This older man came over and started trying to communicate with us and tell us about the history of the park. And it was just really beautiful, and it was this spontaneous, magical moment. That was the sort of thing that I really love about traveling.
The translations are very funny. Like, for example, in the elevator of a hotel, there's a sign that says, no flapping. Like, what does that mean? Like, don't flap your arms in the elevator?
I mean, I love that. I love the translation back and forth. I'm learning a little bit of the language right now on Clara's app. And then also trying to apply it, like, in the classroom and on the street. And there's some things that just, like, we were asking our students what... if there was a word for vampire or something. And then they started talking about these zombies from the Qing dynasty and like how they're different from our zombies. They have like a piece of paper on their forehead and they hop. You're unlocking like a little door every time there's one of those like miscommunications and you actually delve into it. It's just full of surprises. I am attuned towards patterns, and whenever I travel, I'm looking for patterns and color palettes that I've never seen before. The one thing that has really drawn my attention in Guangzhou is the architecture and the power lines, both the old architecture and the new architecture. I think that the buildings here are organized in a totally different way than you see in the US. And the lines, the way lines intersect with each other, I can't exactly describe what it is that makes it different, but it feels different, and I want that to come across in my drawings.
We decided that it was like the negative space in between the buildings in particular, which is such a dorky like kind of art language to use, but it really is shocking like how big this country is and the way that manifests in terms of the architecture, like you're saying. I mean, it's a lot like a city like Rome, where there's many layers of history in Guangzhou. But here it feels like you go from one period and then it's crumbling and then there's this huge new development just shooting up into the sky, which you don't get as much in European cities. It's a fun place to play with like depth of field in your drawings. And I think that was something that we were all really interested in the other day when we were all drawing together in the same alleyway.
Every alleyway is great. It's like
it's just packed with details.
I see things in layers and patterns and colors next to each other, not necessarily things that are blended. I could pick basically anything, but it's always going to come out in a certain way. These shapes, like very graphically. Large shapes with smaller shapes inside them, but things being fairly flat or following certain layer pattern formulas. One of the places that was on the top of our list was the Dialous at Kaiping. These are the strange amalgamation of Eastern and Western architecture in the form of these watchtowers in this rural part of north of Guangzhou. We've been experiencing a whole lot of city life, and there is a lot of greenery here, but I really wanted to see all the birds and the plants and have the architecture be a bit more downplayed. We got our favorite translator, Coco, to take us up there. It was raining, it was super rainy out, and we were like, oh, this isn't gonna be good, but we found actually this perfect place in one of the watchtowers to do drawings. You got an entire panoramic view of the surrounding area. And you could see many of the Dialous, and there was like enough space to set up. All of us brought our sketchbooks and we all started drawing there. I was really happy to get my opportunity to draw leaves and birds and nice curly cues on the towers without having to get wet.
I've never really watched you do one of those marker drawings before. And I think that's such a fun part about traveling with artists again, is that we're seeing the way that we each work really for the first time. I mean, we went to school together and like knew each other freshman year, but we weren't in any classes together. So I never got to see like your method, and of course it's changed a lot in the last few years. I don't know, it's just really fascinating, and I feel like really privileged to get to see how everyone tackles like similar subject matter in different ways, and just like your method of building up a drawing.
One thing about traveling internationally, something always goes wrong, right? The thing is, it's like not what went wrong, but to what degree something went wrong. So I would say, you checked off every single box of everything that could go wrong, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Let's see, you lost 3 bags of luggage that had what? Almost all your camera equipment was in there.
I was very, very lucky in that I decided to bring my C100 and my laptop onto the airplane with me.
Smart move. Very smart move.
I'm literally always going to do that from here on out, because this was a disaster. I had my DSLR and one of my wide angle lens and my tripod and my light kit, all of them.
And all your clothes!
Oh, and all of my clothes.
By the way.
Let's not forget the clothes.
Yes.
I mean...
You had to dress in Lauryn's clothing for a few days.
Yeah,
you had a little bit of an identity crisis when that happened.
I did have a little bit of an identity crisis. I love how Lauryn dresses.
But it's not you!
On Lauryn. And so I was already being put into this foreign environment. It's foreign country, different food, different smells, different language. And on top of it, I'm in someone else's clothes that don't fit me.
And then, no, the best part of the luggage is that you took like a 4-hour bus back to the Hong Kong airport.
It was a 9-hour round trip.
Yeah, it was.
It was myself and Lauryn and Anita, who was one of our hosts here in Guangzhou. And we all got onto the bus.
And you had to go through immigration.
We had to go through immigration twice.
Yeah.
It was hell.
But then you got sick.
Yes.
It wasn't enough for you to get your bags back. You had to get sick. But you know what? Now we have a good story to tell.
We do have a good story to tell.
In my sketchbook practice, I'm really focused on figures a lot, because I think as an illustrator, that's what interests me. It's always a struggle when I'm traveling to like push myself to like absorb different kinds of things, draw a lot of architecture, draw a lot of landscapes. And I've been really trying to do that more recently because I've been traveling a lot, and here especially, I feel like I only now, and we have 2 days left in the trip, and only now do I feel like I finally pushed myself to the extent where I'm like really excited about drawing these buildings and starting to feel like I'm getting that in there.
I totally get what you're saying, where it's like you have to go out of your, well, you don't really have to go out of your way, but you have to get out of your comfort zone to pick out those moments and capture those moments. You're able to make things to have straight and exact lines in your work without it looking sterile.
Now I just do a lot of drawings that are just in black ink.
Yeah.
And for some reason I find that it's easier for me to do those architectural studies with just a really thick like black marker. I need the permanence of like a thick black line to know like, it's too late, I made my choice, now I have to live with it.
That's why I like markers as well, because I had the same thing. I was super timid. Oh, I was so terrible with pencil or colored pencil or even paint. I started using markers because my teacher said that I was way too timid with paint, and also I would use too many colors at once. So markers and pens, you have to scale back. You pick like 1, or in my case, maybe like 5, but that's a lot less than before. And then once the mark is there, you can't do anything about it. You're just like, whatever. And I just like, I see that in your work. I'm like so jealous sometimes because you're able to capture things like so quickly. Like you have, like I would never know that you were super timid, because like when you were drawing cats at the cat cafe, I'm like struggling like, oh, they won't stay still, like because it takes me like at least 2 minutes. You got it down in like 10 seconds and you make it look like a cat.
We got on the subway and went back to the stop where our hotel is, but instead decided to go check out this thing we kept seeing signs for, which was called Comic City, which was like, it turned out to be this giant underground mall. We just descended into this chaos of all these shirts with really funny English language type on them and like slogans and stuffed animals. That's the kind of tacky thing that really thrills me. Just see the way that like mall culture is such a big part of China. All this stuff crammed together in this tiny space was really bizarre and exciting. It's like a mall with the aesthetic of an arcade.
Yes.
Like everything's neon, everything's flashy. All the stores are really small and they're all like very different but also kind of selling the same thing.
Yes.
And then one day we just came around a corner and suddenly we saw this giant silver statue of RoboCop. And across from him, staring him in the eye, is a giant silver statue of Predator.
And it's like, why? But also, like, I don't care. This is amazing.
Yeah, somehow it made this weird sense. I knew immediately that I had to go back to Comic City to do some drawing. And so I was really interested in trying to cram all these things together and really capture like the chaos of this environment where all these weird pop cultural things are kind of in one space. There's like a wall of crane machines filled with stuffed animals. You look at how densely packed these machines are, and it really felt not that different from when later in this trip went out with Clara to a fish market. We did drawing there, and it felt like this weirdly like a similar vibe. Like you see these stuffed animals kind of splayed apart and sort of tangled on top of one another, and I thought that would be a really fun thing to draw that really it would express like how chaotic and bizarre Comic City is. The fish market was really interesting because I had a vision of what like an Asian fish market would be. I really didn't want to go. Clara kind of like suggested it, and I was like, all right, I'll go check it out because I'm a vegetarian and I don't even eat fish. And honestly, even when I ate meat, fish really grossed me out. So I was not thrilled to be going there, but I was kind of interested in like the cultural aspect of it. You know, I've seen like Jiro dreams of sushi. So I had this vision of like a Japanese fish market where it's like under a tent and like in a building and more kind of organized, I guess. And you go to this fish market and it was just like crazy all over the place. I was really fascinated by how everyone was riding these little vehicles to transport the fish, and each vehicle was different. Seeing like the variety of animals that are in these aquariums and boxes was really exciting in kind of a similar way to Comic City. Like it was just so much information all at once. I just immediately sucked into these really strange looking like clams, but with like this oozing kind of like sausage like reaching out. Clara and I both started drawing them at some point, and it was funny, like this crowd just kind of like swarmed on us. It was the most people we've seen, or the most people that have approached us about our drawings since we got here. But they like really were into it, and they were like giving us suggestions that we couldn't understand and like pointing at things, and like vendors are trying to drag us from like one person's stand to like their stand, like trying to show us that their geoducks were better.
You were the one who told me about the Chinese medicine market here in Guangzhou, which I never heard about. But the thing is, the second you told me, I was like, I gotta do my shoot there.
Well, I don't think there's anything that quite better encapsulates being in a completely different culture. Like the marketplaces and like the places where people go and buy the things that you can't buy in the United States.
Well, the funny thing about the medicine market is that when I was a kid, my dad used to give us Chinese medicine for certain things, and my memory of it was this very pungent smell that I just know. And so I remember when I got off the subway to go to the medicine market, I was walking down a couple streets and I was like, okay, well, I'll just follow this way because my map tells me that. And then I smelled the smell and I was like, oh man, I think I'm getting close. And then it's like this odor just like totally overpowers you. I mean, it's a really interesting odor. It doesn't smell bad, but
it's just pungent.
Yeah, it's just really strong. Like you can tell you're in the right place when you smell that. And then going into this market, it's mind-boggling. I mean, the stuff you see, it's gigantic. And you'll see things like dried starfish. And I saw like bones and like, wasn't it like dried skate that we saw?
Dried skate, shark egg sack.
Yeah. And the thing is, I've seen ginseng sold in lots of different places. That's not new. But the thing is, I remember I walked in and there just were like these giant glass like cases,
alchemical jars.
Yeah, like they look like something out of that movie Aliens when they're like growing things in the. They were gigantic. I've never seen ginseng like that. And so when I went to this one stall, I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to draw. But the thing is, then I went to the second floor and there was another area that was all glass, like glass jars as far as you could see. Mm-hmm. And I remember going up and I found this one that was shaped like a very voluptuous vase, and it had 2 big ginseng pieces in it. I mean, I guess the reason I like ginseng just as an object is that the Chinese term zhen is person. And so the whole idea behind ginseng is that the shape of the root looks like a person. So there's something inherently figurative about ginseng. So when I saw it in that vase, I was so entranced by that. And seeing it in water was also weird because I'm used to seeing it dried, or cut up or something.
Was it in water or was it being pickled?
Maybe it was being pickled. It was in some liquid. We got into some tricky situations trying to set up the camera. It wasn't really that easy because the medicine market's really crowded and there's people walking around with carts and stuff like that. So I remember you were so good about like, okay, Clara, sandwich yourself between these 2 guys that are sitting here. But even then it got to be really tricky. So I started the drawing there at the market, but then ultimately I took a reference photo and then finished it over in our hotel later on, which is not the ideal situation, but I feel like just getting the experience of being in there, seeing it in person, finishing off the technicalities later, I think that's fine to do. A lot of us did that. Like Lauryn did that for a couple of her pieces. I feel like you had some collage pieces that you then put together in the hotel. And so there is part of that on-site process that you can then bring into an interior controlled space later on.
Definitely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you have to do what you have to do. We were not able to continue drawing at the medicine market because it was closing down.
You and I have this minor obsession with alleyways.
The Chinese alleyway.
Like, I remember, wasn't there that one time?
What a nice specimen.
There's one time where I think Casey and Lauryn were walking ahead, and you and I just were like magnetically drawn to this alleyway. We just started walking without even paying attention.
Oh, okay, swerve to the left.
Exactly. And Lauryn and Casey are like, where did they go? Like, we just went down this alleyway. But so you found that alleyway that I ultimately did end up drawing from start to finish, almost.
Well, and that seemed much less stressful.
I mean, I'm all for working on site and capturing everything, but there really is almost an art form towards figuring out how to work on site, what's a good spot, what's a bad spot, what's comfortable, what's feasible, what's worth the trouble of doing. Like I did this one alleyway drawing the second day I had gone to the medicine market, and it was really crammed, and I had to stand. I couldn't sit down. And so I'm like sitting there drawing like this. I've got my backpack and I'm like reaching behind to like get the markers out. I was dripping sweat to the point that like the sweat dripped onto my marker drawing.
Yeah. One of the things about the alleyways, and one of the reasons that I really loved that particular piece that you were working on, is the way that private and public space sort of blends together here.
Absolutely.
You know, we'll be going down these very commercial streets and then turn onto these alleyways, and it's not like we're entering a private road, but they're much more intimate.
Yes.
They're much more the place that people actually live their lives. And sometimes they have a little shop or a little restaurant back there, but it's much quieter. There's all these kids running around. And
right.
You know, it's like they're playing, instead of a backyard, what they do is they play in the alleyways. And you really get a sense of these smaller side streets as the places that people really live their lives. And I've really enjoyed getting to know that aspect of the city, sort of the twists and turns.
And actually, one of my favorite things about the alleyways is that crazy mess of wires.
Oh, it's so good.
Why are those so beautiful? There's something about the chaos and the layering of those wires, and you think, does any of this actually work?
They're dynamic lines.
Yeah.
It's
diagonals built into every single composition.
Every single composition, they measure perspective really well. They accentuate perspective. There's sort of an exploded view that happens. And also, I think the eye is really attracted to simple geometry.
Sure.
And so you get these straight lines.
But then some of them are really loose. and languid, and they sort of fall.
And that's satisfying.
Hang, and that's gorgeous. So I love that part of it. We actually ended up walking down this little alleyway, which was a little bit more quiet than the medicine market. What was fun about that alleyway is we all sort of found our place in that space. I sat down on a set of steps. I started drawing the alleyway. Casey, I think you were standing up because you were looking up at something.
Yeah, I was looking up at the top of this building and the trees sort of hanging over it. And I am never going to draw something so high up ever again.
And then I was shooting a lot of footage of the alleyway to just capture what you guys were drawing, and then I sort of got a shot of all you three together, and I thought, wow, this is just the most, like, classic, quintessential art school artists hanging out in a group situation. So then I put the camera down, and I started drawing the three of you.
And then there were all these kids running back and forth and peering over at our drawings, and I think the little kids are my favorite.
I think there was like one kid that wanted to look at my drawing.
Well, and she was very polite until I asked her, 你要不要看? I was like, do you want to see this? And she was like, yeah.
The way I work is not really that spontaneous. I mean, I like to tell myself it is, but it really isn't, because I definitely have a system with my brush pens. Like, I definitely have something where I start with the blacks. I block those in first. I get some of the basic colors blocked in, and then I try to get a little bit more detail. And then I always go in with the water brush afterwards, which is actually new for me. Before, I kept using the colorless blender just to blend in some areas, but the water brush, it's sort of my way of doing watercolor without actually using watercolors.
Right.
And in some ways, this has been a funny trip for me because I'm doing two things that I've always been terrified to do.
Using color.
Using color, which I haven't done in almost 15 years, in my own work, not in terms of teaching. And the other one is doing watercolor-like effects. Because when I was studying, I just hated watercolor with a burning passion. And I know why. I know it was because I wanted it to be acrylic. Like, I couldn't embrace it for what it actually was. And so the brush pens to me are like the perfect hybrid of those things, because the color is mixed for you already in that each marker is its own color, but then you can layer them on top of each other, then you can blend them, then you can add the water brush. And so the marker part of it, I get to retain control. Whereas a watercolor is just like, bleh, everything just goes everywhere.
It does what it wants.
Yeah, it has a mind of its own. And so here I get to like really dictate what the brush pens are doing. I get to be really emphatic about the marks. And then I go in with the water brush and it just all dissolves. I let it dry. I go over it a couple times. So that's been a strategy that I pretty much turn to every single time, because for me, at least, the chaos of working on site, that's all the spontaneity I can deal with. And so for me, that system works better.
I was really struck by how similar to America it felt coming here. We were driving out to these beautiful watchtowers in Guangdong province, in Kaiping, and we stopped at this highway rest stop. Casey and I were talking about it, and I think, Casey, you said, yeah, this could be anywhere in the New Jersey Turnpike. And yet, at the same time, it's very uncanny, because there are these things that are absolutely not the same, because within that rest stop, there was this mob of people trying to get into the bathroom that was just stampeding down. And the same as with the malls. Like, there are malls everywhere in Guangzhou. And when we stepped into the first mall, I think I said to Lauryn, this could be anywhere in America. It's all the same brands. It's the same exact architecture, but there are a million of them.
But you know what's funny about the malls is that they're packed all the time. And I think about a mall in America as being this dead zone where people never go. And here they're there all the time.
Yeah, the only time I've seen a mall that packed is at like the Monmouth Mall in New Jersey, like on Black Friday. But that's every mall here is packed all the time. And also, the food in the malls is so good. We've had some of our best meals in mall restaurants.
It feels like America, but feels like America in, say, the 80s, when mall culture was really big, and that was the third place that you would hang out between work and home. There's this sense of feeling like you're slightly back in time, but still also really far into the future.
Right. It's like everyone's hanging out in the mall, but also then it's like everyone's paying for everything using their smartphone.
We also got to teach together.
Yeah.
That was the first.
teaching with another person, I was really scared because we've known each other for so long, and I'm like, what if Lauryn finds out that I'm a fraud and I'm a terrible teacher? But we had so much fun.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was so great. Casey and I ended up seeing that we were a really good team together because we value some of the same things, but we work very differently. Casey is very professorial, like uses a lot of big words. You are just so eloquent in the way that you speak. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just gonna sound like a caveman. So it was nice to have your language.
Your teaching method is so direct and like exciting, and just from like the first day, like we were doing just like a still life drawing exercise, and you were saying like we were both excited about maybe like starting class with blind contour exercises to loosen the kids up.
Yeah.
And at the last minute I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, there isn't a lot of time, maybe we shouldn't do it. And you're like, no, let's do it. And you were like really animated, and you were like standing up and like timing everyone and like really just like thrilled to get everyone to draw a blind contour. And I was like, this is such a good energy. But I think your method of teaching actually is like really effective in this particular environment where we don't know Chinese and our students have a very limited grasp of English for the most part. One fun thing about working, like teaching together, is that we almost form like a comedy duo. Like just making a show of how we don't know Chinese as a way to engage the student. As soon as we figured out that we can engage the kids, having almost an exchange of like learning.
I've learned a lot about teaching. I did not know how to work with students who had English as a second language beforehand. Like I'd had a few, but it's been in like very isolated circumstances in an area where I'm comfortable. I feel like I've gotten something out of this that was more than just teaching.
Yeah, it's wild to think about how many of my students in the past, like what percentage of them have been ESL, English second language students, and how I never really even tried to make accommodations for them before, or really like had any true context for what their experience was like.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to take like some of the lessons we learned from this and bring it back to my teaching back in the United States.
Well, I don't want to go home. I want to come back. This place has basically blown my mind. I never thought I would ever love to live in a city, but there are so many things about here that we've barely even experienced yet that just seem amazing. While I'm happy to go back, I hope, really, really hope that we come back soon.
你好.
你好.
黄色.
黄色.
他们在睡觉.
他们在睡觉.
This is good.
这个孩子在跑步.
这个孩子在跑步.